it's a pre-digested food, and so when the digestive system receives something that is fermented or pre-digested, it's going to be a lot easier and less taxing on a digestive system that sometimes could have a pre-medical condition for some people, or if some people um, experience a sort of a medically diagnosed with celiacs or Crohn's and things like that, then consuming a fermented vegetable or the sauerkraut is really going to assist with that because it is pre-digested, very easy on the system.
Today's episode is all about sauerkraut and kombucha. It's going to be an enjoyable and educational discussion with the owner of Herbs of Life, which is a company that I came across here in Australia after being a huge fan of their sauerkraut, which I buy locally. And so today I've invited Daniel to this episode to tell us all about the health benefits of sauerkraut and kombucha and how we might be able to enjoy those on a regular basis. How are you, Daniel?
Very well, thank you, Clint. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, let me first start by explaining how this came about. We eat sauerkraut on a regular basis, my wife and I. The kids don't eat it yet, although the 4-year-old has sampled it. And she does a thumbinator where she rotates her thumbs like it's like a, you don't know what's going to happen. And then she gives like a rating with her thumbs.
Sure. Yeah.
And she gives it neutral. So she's neutral on sauerkraut at age 4. But I can assure you that by the time she grows up a bit more, she'll be into your stuff because it's fantastic. We were buying it was the turmeric and ginger sauerkraut from the local health food store. And my wife and I were looking at each other saying, this is the best sauerkraut we've ever had in our life. And you've got those traditional things going on, like the piece of cabbage sitting on top. When you crack open the jar, it makes that beautiful pop sound. And just obviously the taste is a high priority as well, and it just tastes delicious. So congratulations on the products that you're making. And tell us briefly to start, how'd you get into this business?
Oh, well, that's a bit of a story, probably going back in 2008. I was an engineer in a previous life, and I was working in the US at the time. And while I was over there, I contracted some sort of stomach bug from eating a vast array of different foods over there. And the medical doctors weren't much help. And so after circling a local Whole Food store in the little town I was living in, they had kombucha on the shelf. Now, I've heard of yogurt and sauerkraut, but I've never heard of kombucha. So I had my first bottle, and it very much helped me and pretty much cleaned me out in a way. And when I got back to Australia in 2009, I wanted to continue drinking it, and it wasn't available. So I began making it here. So a few years on, through experimentation and sharing recipes and what we did, then I was able to develop something and developed a sellable product with the kombucha. And those few years, a lot of research as well of what it is and the benefits. But the sauerkraut came into the picture probably, it was around about 2016, I believe. We found it quite natural, a natural complement to kombucha. And then we wanted to align ourselves as a fermentary, a certified organic fermentary. So sauerkraut was just a very natural and easy progression to that. Our production manager is actually a chef by trade as well. And so we experimented with a few different recipes of sauerkraut, and we wanted to be very traditional. As part of our ethics and our ethos to be certified organic, we also wanted to do handcrafted, premium product and traditional. Our production manager knew that all along, and his level of chef expertise really demonstrated to us what we wanted, basically our aim and objective. And he aligned with us very quickly, and he wanted that as well. So I said, well, look, let's try something just with salt and cabbage and a few different herbs and spices and see how we go. The results proved for themselves. It worked out really, really well. And earlier on, we had the decision of what methodology to use, because you could do an in-jar ferment or you could do a barrel ferment. We chose to do the in-jar ferment, similar to a pot set yogurt. That's what we do, a pot set sort of fermented sauerkraut. And so it all ferments with its own juices in that jar, and then nothing is lost during the transfer process. We found that to be quite advantageous and of great health benefit, of course. It was like minimal touching of the product and no loss of nutrients or juices during transfer or, rejarring, packaging, etc. So we very much like that idea, and we did that from the start, and it worked out really well. So yeah, the sauerkraut has been in our journey since 2016.
Yeah, beautiful. And you've got quite a big reach now across Australia. And I just want to say at this point, if you're listening to this outside of Australia, the information that we're about to share is still going to be highly valuable, even if you're not able to be fortunate enough to get hold of Herbs of Life's products, because they don't ship internationally. I'm looking for a reaction from Daniel. No.
No, not yet. Sorry.
No. But we're going to cover the sort of the general health benefits, the ways of preparation, the ways in which you can consume these products, frequency, and so all this is going to be relevant wherever you are. So let's go through those in no particular order of priority. Let's start with this. Let's stay on the sauerkraut first of all. Let's say someone says, okay, my digestion isn't so good. What are some of the health benefits from eating the sauerkraut?
One of the main things that comes to mind is that it's a pre-digested food, and so when the digestive system receives something that is fermented or pre-digested, it's going to be a lot easier and less taxing on a digestive system that sometimes could have a pre-medical condition for some people, or if some people experience a sort of a medically diagnosed with celiacs or Crohn's and things like that, then consuming a fermented vegetable or the sauerkraut is really going to assist with that, because it is pre-digested, very easy on the system. It's not something, unlike grains. Grains can be very taxing because it's a very heavy food, and the system needs to break it down into all its little essential components and actually create a sugar out of that. And then you receive a sort of an insulin spike. But when you're consuming a fermented vegetables, specifically sauerkraut, the sugars are digested. The fiber is somewhat digested as well. So you've got this food which is a very, very simple carbohydrate, very easily digestible, and very minimal inflammation, or pretty much no inflammation. That's one of the main benefits. Yeah.
It's a living food, isn't it? And you mentioned pre-digestion, and I know you may be trying to avoid any technical words to keep things simple, but we've spoken offline about the enzymes that are inside the food that are produced to break down those foods. So, as you said, the carbohydrates become simple sugars. Furthermore, the fats become fatty acids, and the proteins become amino acids. And so your body would otherwise do that work using specific enzymes to break down specific macro molecules. But when the food is presented in all of its micro components, it's immediately bioavailable. And so that's tremendous. Talk about the bacteria. This is something that we all get excited about in our community. Autoimmunity is really underpinned by an imbalance of our gut bacteria. And so tell us about what's going on when we consume sauerkraut.
So sauerkraut, during fermentation process, the simple sugars of the cabbage are fermented along. The salt that's used is the starter or the activator to commence the fermentation. So you've got the natural yeasts on the vegetable that's fermenting with the natural sugars of the vegetable. That level of fermentation, lactic acid gets created, and that's why you get that slight vinegary sort of flavor. And that's the lactic acid in that, which is totally fine. But that is, in a way, that juice is a prebiotic, and so the stomach, it needs that. our stomach, which is I think is our first line of defense and our immune system, that needs to run at almost like 100% hydrochloric acid in order to burn anything that comes in. When that tipping point is unbalanced, that acid alkaline, it throws the acid off, and then your stomach becomes very easily alkaline. So what the sauerkraut does, the juices, it very quickly puts that acid back into the stomach. It's an alkaline forming food, even though it's acidic tasting, but it very quickly balances out the stomach so the stomach can digest foods again. But then it's a probiotic as well because it is living. It has full of probiotic enzymes. And so it's actually going to put that beneficial bacteria back into the gut so that you can digest other foods as well as your immune system can thrive. So sauerkraut, in essence, is both a pre and a probiotic food.
Yeah, absolutely.
Respect, yeah.
And I was trying to look at the research on this before we had our conversation, and it's not easy to pin this down. One of our audience members might have this data, but what I was looking for is the sort of the specific strains of bacteria and the typical quantities of those bacteria present in, say, 100 grams of sauerkraut. And whilst the strains have tended to be studied, and that information can be readily attained, the amount of bacteria varies wildly depending on how long it's fermented, and I guess the way that it's put together, and how much salt's used, I guess, and a few other variables. But the general consensus is that we've got a range of different bacteria that are healthy for humans being consumed with sauerkraut, and that their quantity is very high. So they are the two things that we feel happy about when we think about sauerkraut.
Very much so.
Have you had customers who have consumed the sauerkraut and come to you and say, other than delicious, say that their digestion has improved or that they feel healthier?
Yeah, definitely. And so we've had quite a bit of feedback in the past, and then they've asked me why that's happened. So I've explained to them, not all sauerkraut is equal out there on the market. Do look for a raw sauerkraut and one that hasn't been, I guess, tainted with the aid of other bacterias or probiotics or things like that. It needs to be more of a natural, traditional ferment so that the cabbages can release everything possible. But I think I would attribute that to that factor that we just leave the salt in the cabbage to do its work for its 3 to 4 week fermentation, and that would be probably partly most of the reason why it would be all the bacteria. So yeah, we've had quite a few customers actually in the past. Yeah.
You touched upon something that I'm really pleased you mentioned, because it wasn't on my checklist here of things to bring up, but it's crucial, and that is the non sort of handmade or non locally made versions are often pasteurized, flash heated.
Yes.
Talk about that, because your average consumer, of which I have been in the past, made this mistake, have walked into a store, saw what appears to be a very healthy looking label on a sauerkraut, thinking, oh, this thing looks like it's made by a hippie somewhere near the coast, and it's going to be definitely full of rich bacteria and enzymes. But then in the fine print, and sometimes not even on the bottle, especially in the United States, you don't know that thing's been heated to preserve its lifetime. What happens when we heat it?
Well, the bacteria and the enzymes die, basically. So and then the sugar content increases because you're cooking the vegetable. Every time you cook a vegetable or a fruit, the sugar content does increase versus of it being raw or fermented. And so that's what happens. There ends up being no bacteria, no living enzymes, and you end up eating something that is high in fiber, sure, higher in sugar compared to if it was raw, and no probiotics. So I think in that sense, it's probably just the basic, maybe vitamins and minerals, but without it being living. Yeah.
It certainly defeats. It certainly defeats the main sort of exciting aspect of sauerkraut, at
Yeah,
least
yeah,
in my view. Um, the taste is obviously much more enjoyable compared to just eating cabbage raw or even eating cabbage with a bit of salt. Not many people want to do that. But
yeah,
when you add the, when you combine it together and you add the fermentation, and then, as you do in your company, add some beautiful combinations of flavors with, for example, the turmeric and the ginger, which is our favorite, favorite combination, then it's so delicious, and you feel so happy about the health benefits that you actually crave it.
yeah. Yeah, well, a good advantage of having those different combinations of vegetables and spices is that we ferment with those vegetables and spices. So even the turmeric and the ginger is fermented with the cabbage. So you're also getting a fermented benefit from a fermented ginger and fermented turmeric as well, along with the fermented cabbage. Um, but yeah, I feel it's most important to always purchase a raw product when it comes to sauerkraut. We've had our customers in the past. We've had actually both ends of the spectrum. We've had customers that are just buying it for the flavor, and then they would actually cook with it, and or put it into the fry pan or something like that. And they like it like that, and that's also totally fine. It's what they would prefer or how they choose to eat it. We've had the other half of our customers that are actually buying it for its probiotic and enzyme spectrum, and they're like, no, we want that, and I want to eat it raw and put it in salads and have it with dehydrated crackers and things like that. So, and yeah, so I don't know. It's up to the customer. It's up to your taste, and we get all sorts.
Yeah. Let's now just before we wrap up on the sauerkraut, can you can you give us the sort of things to look out for if we want to try and make this at home?
Yeah,
Now, people can obviously go online and watch YouTube videos of people making sauerkraut. We're not trying to sort of create a substitute for that, which is going to be comprehensive. But let's just set the scene in someone's mind what they might be in for if they do think, I wouldn't mind giving this a go at home, just so that they can decide if they think that they should go and give it a shot. What should someone expect if they're going to go down this path?
Oh, I think expect nothing, because if you expect nothing, then you've got nothing to lose, and then you won't be disappointed. But as a rule of thumb, you're dealing with a fermented vegetable, and so everything needs to be clean, of course. Even the room itself. If there's any other molds or anything else in the room, it can actually be attracted to whatever you have fermenting. So whatever vegetable you've got fermenting, the kraut, it can attract that, and it can build a layer of mold on top. But learn from that, and understand that it is a living food, so it needs to be treated with respect and kindness. And it's okay to make a mistake. It really is. We certainly had made mistakes, and then you just learn from that and move on and try something different. Um, but give it a go. It is very straightforward. It is time consuming, of course, but it is straightforward. And at one stage in our history, everybody did it, and it's
Yeah.
and it's good to get your hands wet again.
Yeah, that's so true. And we didn't go there. But my daughter Angelina, I think she researched that sauerkraut originated in China or thereabouts, and then later developed its name from Europe. But it was originally practiced like in the sort of the Asian region originally,
Mhm.
before becoming more associated with Europe because of its German sounding name. I'm taking a guess. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
but yes,
like even around that sort of Siberia area,
yep.
um, and that sort of Central Asia or Western Asia, a lot of fermented foods that we see have originated around that sort of Siberian Mongolia area, and
Right.
and in fact, the Russians have had it for many years, probably even centuries before the West took it on. Yeah,
Yes, yes. Okay. Well, it's surviving the test of time because it's delicious. It's a way of past civilizations having food available in times when there wasn't food available, because it keeps, doesn't it, by being able to ferment
definitely.
the food. Yeah. Then you've got to preserve your own natural preservative, and maybe not by today's standards, but certainly by historical standards, where you could maybe keep something for months, as opposed to just days in the past. So,
Mhm.
look, if anyone's keen, just jump online, go and find a video of someone making inside rheumatoid support. We've got a couple of videos of sauerkraut production. So go check those out, or check them out on check different videos out on YouTube. So Daniel, you helped your own digestion with kombucha. Let's talk about kombucha next.
Yeah.
Something that I went through a phase with where I was drinking 2 or 3 a day, almost like it was, a Coca-Cola addiction. and I don't think that it wasn't a healing strategy. It was definitely an enjoyment strategy for me. And I think that we established offline as well that I might have been consuming one that may have been flash heated the way that I've just warned everyone not to consume those. So
Yeah.
let's go back. Let's rewind though first on kombucha. What is it? And just describe, how it's made and why we might want to drink it.
Yeah, I think simply put, kombucha is a fermented probiotic tea. If I was to sum it up in those few
Yeah.
words, that's basically what it is. And it's fermented with a brew of sweetened green or black tea, or you can use a combination of both. Traditionally sweetened with raw cane sugar. That's the food source for the fermentation, by the way. It's not to alarm any of the audience members that you're drinking a sugary drink. It's far from being a sugary drink, but the sugar is there just as a food source. The culture itself is a symbiotic colony of living bacteria and living yeasts, and they live in harmony, and they ferment simultaneously. It resembles something of a jellyfish without the tentacles, if you could picture that in mind's eye. But don't be alarmed, don't be afraid. It is actually edible if you are brave enough. But what it is it's somewhere between a lichen and a fungus. It's not quite a plant, it's not an animal, but it's in this sort of fungus lichen category. That's essentially what it is in simple terminology, in common language. I mentioned about the bacteria and the enzymes in this colony. So the first stage of the fermentation, what happens is that it consumes the sugar and the oxygen. So kombucha, for example, unlike beer, wine, and cider, that uses a dead yeast, and it's an ethanol yeast, traditionally brewer's yeast or champagne yeast, depending if it's cider or wine or beer. And it's a dead yeast, and the whole objective of those drinks is to produce ethanol, and that's it. The sole objective of kombucha is to produce probiotics and digestible enzymes. It is a pre-digested food, just like sauerkraut. But the whole objective of the fermentation is to produce those probiotics and digestible enzymes. And so this colony works by consuming the sugar and the oxygen coming in. So it's an open to atmospheric pressure vessel, and the oxygen comes in, it consumes that and consumes the sugar. The byproduct being ethanol and carbon dioxide. And then the enzymes kick into gear, and they consume the ethanol and transform them into probiotics. So a traditional kombucha, or if you're making something at home, then it will always be very low ethanol. There's always trace amounts of ethanol with kombucha. That always happens with traditional fermentation. And in fact, even sauerkraut, even that has trace amounts of ethanol. It's very, very small, sometimes even too small to measure in comparison to kombucha. But any traditional wild fermented product like a sauerkraut or a kombucha is going to have trace amounts of ethanol. Our kombucha typically comes in less than 1%, which meets the national standard of non-alcoholic beverage. And it's taken us years to get to that and develop the recipe to bring it under that 1% because it is a commercial product. So that's traditionally what it is and how it ferments. What to look out for, you look out for something, first of all, that needs to be raw and not pasteurized or cooked or homogenized in any sort of way. I always tell people, one thing I advocate, if you're buying a kombucha, please do buy a craft kombucha, a craft product, and look at the ingredients. There is quite a few brands out there, especially in the supermarkets and service stations. And some of these brands in supermarkets and service stations also exist in some health food stores. always look at the ingredients, because it's what's on the inside that's going to count, really. So if you're seeing ingredients that you can't even draw on a paper and you don't know what it is, it's best to put it back on the shelf. And these could be the artificial ingredients like the erythritol, the fermented glucose, the steviol glucosides, and the steviol extracts, things like that, where you might question, well, what is that? Can you actually draw it on a piece of paper? If you can't draw it and you can't even picture it, then why does it belong in your mouth? Why are you consuming it? That's what I ask. So as a rule of thumb, eat real food. It's just that simple. So with kombucha, and to tell if it's a real kombucha, look at the ingredients. There needs to be fermented with the kombucha culture, a good water source, the organic cane sugar, and tea. That's it. Those 4 simple ingredients is what makes up a real good kombucha. We've got 7 flavors in our range, so we like to also add a range of different fruits and spices to ours, create a variety and other health benefits. The water is very, very important, I feel, because it's basically 90% water, this product. So you need to get the water source right. We use spring water, and it's sourced from the Blue Mountains, and it's on the western side of the Blue Mountains in the Wolgan Valley. It's a very wonderful spring out there, and we purchased it through a company called Wild Wolgan, and we've used spring water for many, many years now, probably even since the beginning. And a few reasons why we choose to use spring water is because, first of all, so we're a certified organic company, and all our products are certified organic. Water is an ingredient that you can't certify organic, because the organic agents and the body consider water to be mineral-based instead of carbon-based. They consider it to be from the clouds, not from the earth. And as a result, you can't certify water. We've been certified organic now for over 5 years, and my discussion with the auditor was, well, you're telling me that I could use certified organic inputs, but the water, I could just use tap water and I'll be still organic. And he said, well, technically, yes, that's what. And I wasn't happy with that. I don't consume tap water myself, but I wasn't happy with that because of also the chemicals that are put into tap water, the chlorine and the chloramine and the fluoride. So I said, look, I don't want that in my product. If it's in the product, you're going to get a chemical fermentation. So I said, no, I'll go a step further, and I'm just getting spring water where it's completely free of all those chemicals. And it's basically H2O with the mineral composition of a spring. And that way, we don't achieve a chemical fermented product. Our kombucha is a very clean tasting. It's soft because it's, you're without these chemicals that tap water typically has. What was the other question? With that.
No, that's brilliant. That covered everything that I was going to ask. As you got into the warnings around the ingredients, I was just going to sort of jump in and say, well, what are the ones to avoid? What are the ones that we should be looking for? And you covered that perfectly. It fascinated me that you said that you don't drink the tap water. Is that something that runs, in your family as well? Do you sort of follow this sort of approach? I spoke to David Wolf many years ago, who's like a raw food advocate and sort of has a huge following online. He's fascinated about water. He said he has traveled the world looking for the cleanest water supplies. He's like a water nut, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in a good way. Lovely dude, and just mad about water. So do you feel that this has played a role in your own health as well?
Yeah, 100%. Most of our body, what's inside of our body is water. And it is, in my opinion, it's incredibly important to look after that and nourish that and make sure that you're getting good water intake. And so, although there are a lot of filters that you can buy out there to filter out tap water, one thing that my research that I found, even if you were to go to the nth degree to filter out town water or treated dam water as it is, and for it to be completely chemical free, treated water is considered dead water. It's a dead cell water, and it will not hydrate you the same way that spring water will, no matter how hard you try. And so we have evolved, just like every animal and every other species on this planet, to consume rainwater and spring water because it is it is natural, and it is a living celled water. So even the water itself is living. And that just makes when you're fermenting with a living celled water, you almost create a bit of a superfood there as well. And that's another really valid reason why we use spring water versus a filtered tap water, because it is a living celled water. And just like David Wolf said, yeah, it's water is incredibly vital. It's really, really important. And so that's for us. It's a big priority with our kombucha, to make sure we get a really good water source that's clean.
Mm. You've made me want to drink both spring water from now on and nothing else. And you've also made me want to go out and buy some of your kombucha. So, yeah, definitely piqued my desire for those two things. It's very hard to get spring water. I don't feel like buying spring water in bottles either. It just feels like that's sort of a two-step forward. And then you've got this recycling and sort of carbon footprint issue with buying bottled water. Is there a solution that you could suggest for that?
I'm sorry, I don't think I've got a solution to that, because we're living, we are modern men and modern women, and we're living in cities and suburbs and towns, and that we've constructed, and we've constructed this environment around us, and it is far removed from how we were traditionally living hundreds of years ago. And so the source of spring water is it's not there like it used to be. So I don't know if I've got a simple solution, but one thing that actually just come to mind would be rainwater. Rainwater is probably the next best thing. So obviously that would need to be filtered to a certain degree for sediment, etc. If you're collecting rainwater, if you're living in the suburbs or in a city metropolitan area, but consuming rainwater would be better than a treated dam water or treated tap water for sure. I feel, and maybe that would be the next best thing. If you can get spring water, and you can find, there are companies out there. I mentioned the one that we purchased from Wild Walgan. He actually sells his water in bulk, and there's a few companies that do that as well, where you can do a home order in bulk, maybe in bulk containers and stuff, and that could be more environmentally friendly, more feasible, and a good way to get your spring water, as opposed to just getting slabs of bottles or something.
Because they probably do a rotational thing, right? They'll probably show up, take your empty container, put a new container in, and so the containers are being rotated as opposed to being constantly thrown into recycling centers.
Yeah, the owner of Wild Walgan, he does pride himself on being environmentally friendly and as minimal impact as possible, and he loves that rotation, and he does do that.
Yeah, I like that. We might look into that. It's probably the one area that we've paid little attention to over the years. I used to drink a lot of alkaline water, and I just found that I ended up confusing myself too much around the timing of drinking alkaline water, because, as you well put it before, we want to have a very acidic stomach. But if you're drinking alkaline water for the purposes of alkalizing pretty much everything in the body except your stomach and your blood, all the other fluids in our body, it's hard to alkalize those without, alkalizing the stomach. And so then you're creating a counterproductive impact. So I used to always try and drink alkaline water late at night when I wasn't digesting food and I wasn't about to digest food. But then you're up at night going to the bathroom. And it's hard. You're always trying to time this alkaline water sort of consumption. So I ended up just reverting back to tap water years and years ago. And I'm not totally satisfied, especially after speaking with you and becoming more enlightened.
Yeah. With the alkaline water, I don't know, and this is, I guess, a question: is it alkaline forming, or is it just an alkaline food?
It's alkaline going in, so you can measure the pH of it on the bottle. It says the pH of this water is, and it's like, instead of it being 7.1 or whatever water is 7.4 or whatever, it might be 8, or in some cases as high as 9. So, right. Remember that an order of magnitude for the pH scale is logarithmic. So yes. That's a lot more alkaline than typical water.
It sounds like the overconsumption of that particular water, if what you're saying is true, it sounds like it's actually going to throw the pH balance off in the stomach, and it may not necessarily be um, the best thing
Mm,
for health.
mm,
Because one thing, like I've had several friends that say to me, "Oh, I've got acid reflux and heartburn," and through experience, um, personal experience as well as for my friends, the first thing I say to them is I say, "Well, I'll squeeze you half a lemon. So you got fresh lemon juice and a little bit of warm water, and what that is, it's going to be acid entering into the stomach, but it is alkaline forming, and so that actually very quickly balances out the stomach and puts it
mm,
back in the stomach back into acid where it's supposed to be, and it actually takes away the heartburn and indigestion. Um,
mm.
and something as simple as that actually works really, really well. You could also use an organic ACV with a little bit of warm water, and that works just as good too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But,
Yep.
but yeah,
Beautiful. The old ACV, another thing that's been
yeah,
around forever, right?
yeah, it
That's
has. It
apple
really
cider.
has.
Yeah. Yeah. Apple cider vinegar for those people who aren't down with it, yo.
Yeah.
So well, thank you very much. This has just been a very chilled, very calm, enjoyable chat with you about these
Thank you.
wonderful foods. Thank you. I've really enjoyed covering this off. It's something I've not talked about before on one of our episodes, and I don't think I've ever I feel like I have nailed locked in the sauerkraut, no questions asked. Wonderful, eat it a lot. Boom, ticket, live my life. Kombucha, I'm still yet to consume your kombucha, which I'm hoping is going to be that aha moment where, I don't feel anything other than healthy, good consumption in the stomach, feel light, happy, no issues. Because I think it's fair to say that for most people with rheumatoid, we got there because of digestive issues, or at least we had them even if we didn't know them. And so,
Yeah.
whilst every other person might be able to consume, virtually anything without problems, we always have these little, residual, got to be careful with this, got to be careful with that. So I'm hoping that, when I buy your kombucha, which I will do very soon, that gives me that, oh, wow, yeah, this is what I've been missing. And get back in.
I
Mm.
encourage your audience to try different varieties of fermented foods. Not every fermented food is going to work for you. It's very an individualistic approach. So, but just try it and
Yeah.
see which works for you. Some people work really well with kombucha. Some people don't. It all
Yeah.
depends.
Yeah.
But yeah, just give it a shot.
Okay, will do. Most definitely. I'll email you and let you know. How can other
Thank
people
you.
get in contact with you? I know that, you don't want to field just general kombucha questions from around the world, but if there's someone wanting to, buy your products, they could ask at their local health food store, but perhaps you might even supply locally in the Sydney metropolitan area. Where are we at with regards to that? If someone wants more from you in terms of your products?
Yeah, so we do ship around all the major cities and towns in Australia. Our website, www.herbsoflife.com.au. We don't ship overseas, I'm sorry. But for the overseas listeners, just please take note if you're wanting to buy sauerkraut and kombucha, take note of what to look out for, basically,
Yep.
because there's a lot of stuff out there. But to our local Australians, our website, we could ship to you. And there's also a range of health food stores that stock our stuff as well. Harris Farm Markets. So,
Yeah, beautiful. And my local health food store is how I found out about you, and they're a big advocate of your stuff. And I gave them such good feedback about you, and they said, "Oh, Daniel, he's the best. He's so good." Blah blah blah. So we
thank
built a
you.
connection down there too at the store because of what you're doing. So thanks so much for speaking with me today, and thanks so much for sharing all this great information
Thank
and
you,
for
Clint.
doing what you're doing. It's such a wonderful contributing kind of role that you have, doing stuff that it needs to be done. So thank you, Daniel.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.